Someone once said, the deepest pain isn't betrayal. It's realizing you were never truly loved in the first place. I believed I was the father of that child. I held her in my arms. I rocked her to sleep every night. I gave up everything to protect a family that never really existed. And then, just one piece of paper, one sentence, shattered my entire world. This is the story of how I found out the baby was never mine, and how the woman I loved used my heart to cover her lie. I never thought I'd be one of those men, the ones you hear about in stories or gossip, or those sad, infuriating Reddit threads. The man who raised a child that wasn't his. But here I am, and I don't even hate her for it. At least, not in the way you might expect. You see, when I met Claire, I was already halfway through fixing my life. I wasn't rich. I wasn't some alpha male or whatever the internet likes to talk about. But I had a decent job, a quiet routine, and a heart that still wanted to believe in love. Claire. She was magic. You know that type of person who walks into a room and the air changes? Like everyone becomes a little more alive, a little more awake? That was her. We met through a mutual friend at a small cafe downtown. She was reading a book on psychology, something about attachment theory. I made a dumb joke about needing therapy just to understand the title. She laughed, that kind of laugh that makes you want to keep being funny, even if you're not. A few weeks in, I was hooked. A few months later, I was in love. And 6 months after that, she told me she was pregnant. It wasn't exactly planned. We hadn't talked about kids yet, not seriously. But when she told me, I didn't panic. I smiled. I actually smiled. She cried in my arms that night. Tears of joy, or so I thought. We moved in together a week later. Life moved fast after that. Too fast, maybe. We decorated a nursery. We fought over cribs and diapers and stroller brands. We made silly lists of names. She liked vintage names like Eleanor or Josephine. I preferred something simpler, like Emma. I remember the first time she let me feel the baby kick. Her skin was warm under my hand, and her eyes... God, her eyes were glowing. I thought I had everything. Even when she started acting distant, I chalked it up to pregnancy hormones. She'd get irritated more often, especially when I asked about doctor appointments I wasn't allowed to go to. She said they were routine, boring, that it was easier if she went alone. I didn't argue. I wanted to be the calm, supportive partner, the one who didn't make her life harder, the one she'd always feel safe with. But something in me noticed it. The way she flinched when I said, I love you. The way she hesitated just a second too long before responding. The way her phone was always on silent now. Still, I buried the doubts. We were about to be parents. That had to mean something. The night she went into labor, I drove like a madman to the hospital. She screamed and cursed and held my hand like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. When our daughter was born, I cried. I didn't even try to hide it. Claire looked tired, beautiful, and so distant. But I brushed it off again. I always did. The months that followed were blurry. Diapers, sleepless nights, the smell of baby formula. But I was happy. I thought we were building something real. Until one day, 6 months later, Claire dropped a name I didn't recognize. She said it like it was normal, like it had always been there. She was on the phone whispering in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep. Yeah. No, I'll tell him soon. I just need more time. He's good with her. Better than I expected. She didn't know I was listening. She didn't know that sentence would break something inside me that would never fully heal. I didn't confront her right away. I waited. I watched. I looked through her texts one night when she fell asleep on the couch. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. There he was. Tom. The messages weren't romantic. Not exactly. But they were familiar. Too familiar for someone she swore she hadn't spoken to in years. There was one photo. A man holding a baby. My baby. My stomach sank. My hands went numb. Still, I said nothing. Why? Because I wanted to believe I was wrong, that there was an explanation, that maybe I had just misunderstood. But the doubt, once planted, grew like rot. A few days later, she asked if she could take the baby to visit her mother for the weekend. I agreed, and then I made a decision that would change everything. I bought an at-home DNA test. I still remember the shaking in my hands as I swabbed my daughter's cheek while Claire was out shopping. I mailed it in the next morning, barely able to breathe, and then I waited. 1 week, 2. The results came on a Thursday. I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope in my hand, my heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for hours, telling myself it didn't matter, that she was my daughter, no matter what. But it did matter, because I'd been lied to, and deep down, I already knew the truth. The envelope sat on my lap for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't just paper, it was everything. Everything we'd built, everything I thought I knew, all of it, compressed into a single document with 2 columns and a verdict. I opened it, and just like that, everything inside me broke. No paternal match. 3 words, 3 cold, clinical words that hit harder than any betrayal I'd ever imagined. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, silent, numb. There's a strange peace that comes in the moment your world collapses, a quiet stillness, like time steps aside to let you grieve before the real pain kicks in. I stared at the wall, the carpet, my hands. I couldn't even bring myself to look at the baby monitor on the dresser, because for 6 months, I called her, my daughter. I whispered to her in the dark, sang her to sleep, changed her diapers, told her I'd protect her forever. And now? She wasn't mine. But here's the part that messed me up the most. I still loved her. Even knowing the truth, I still looked at that tiny face and felt the same ache in my chest. So I didn't confront Claire right away. I needed time. To breathe. To think. To figure out who I was without the lie I'd been living in. Claire noticed I was distant. She asked if I was tired, if work was stressful. I nodded. I told her I just needed space, and she smiled like everything was fine. Maybe she thought I'd never find out, or maybe she was waiting for me to say something. A week passed, then 2. Each day I woke up wondering if today was the day I'd finally face her, but instead I studied her routines, her calls, her lies. She had no idea I knew, until one night, 3 weeks after I read the results, she sat next to me on the couch and placed her hand on mine. "Can we talk?" she asked gently. I turned to her. She looked nervous. Too nervous for a conversation about dinner plans or weekend visits. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice calm. She took a breath. Her eyes darted toward the baby's room, then back to me. "There's something I need to tell you. About before we met." I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just listened. "There was someone," she began. "It wasn't serious. At least I didn't think it was. We broke up, and a few weeks later, I met you. And then I found out I was pregnant." I swallowed hard. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the coffee table, like she couldn't bear to see my face. "I didn't plan for it to happen this way," she continued. "But you were so good to me, so kind, and I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't even know if he'd stick around, and it just felt easier not to say anything." I waited. "Are you mad?" she whispered. "Mad? No." That word didn't even begin to describe it. I felt gutted, humiliated. used. But more than anything, I felt tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a safety net. I looked at her, and for the first time since all of this began, I saw her clearly. Not the version of her I'd fallen for, but the real her. The one who could lie so easily. The one who let me name a child that wasn't mine. The one who watched me cry tears of joy in a delivery room, knowing the truth. And yet, despite all of that, I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't call her names. I just asked, "Why didn't you think I deserved the truth?" Her eyes widened. "I was scared," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought you'd leave." "And lying to me was better?" I asked. She didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I stood up, walked to the nursery, and looked down at the sleeping baby. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, and none of this was her fault. I knew then that whatever happened next, I wouldn't take it out on her. But Claire, she wasn't going to get away with this. She wanted safety, security, a man who wouldn't ask questions. Well, now she was going to meet the version of me she never planned for. I walked back to the living room. She was crying now, face buried in her hands. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my jacket, opened the door, and said quietly, "I'll be staying at a hotel for a while. We'll talk about custody. Don't contact me unless it's about the baby." Then I closed the door behind me. The night air was cold, but it felt like the first breath of truth I'd had in a long time. The hotel room was small, just a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the parking lot. But it was quiet, and for now, that was all I needed. That first night, I lay on the stiff mattress staring at the ceiling for hours, playing everything. Back in my mind, Claire's voice, the way she looked at me when she confessed, and most of all, the way I had loved that child like my own. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Who am I now if everything I built was a lie? But there was no answer, just silence and the ticking of an old wall clock that felt louder than it should have. The days passed slowly. I still went to work, showed up to meetings, smiled when I had to. No one knew. No one saw. Grief is strange like that. It can hollow you out without leaving a mark on your face. Claire texted a few times, mostly short updates. She slept well last night, or she has a bit of a fever. I responded with one-word replies. Okay, thanks. Noted. She tried to ask about me once. I ignored it. I wasn't ready. But I was thinking, planning, becoming someone new. I started reading more. Not just about paternity fraud, which honestly felt like a punch to the gut every time I typed it into a search bar, but also about my rights, about custody, about what a man in my situation could actually do. Most people don't talk about this part. The legal limbo, the way the law treats the man who raised a child he didn't biologically father. Turns out, there's no easy answer. In some states, you're still considered legally responsible, even after the truth comes out. And that scared me. Not because I didn't want to care for the baby, but because I didn't know if I could keep loving her without breaking apart. She wasn't mine, but I had already given her everything. One evening, about 2 weeks after I left, I got a call from Claire's number. I didn't pick up. Then she texted, "Please come over. I need to talk. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to hear something." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put the phone down, tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. So, the next day, I went back to the house. She opened the door slowly. She looked smaller, like someone had turned the volume of her presence all the way down. There were bags under her eyes. Her hair was messy. She didn't have that glowing, confident energy she used to carry around like a weapon. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I stepped inside. The house looked the same, but colder somehow. The baby was asleep in her crib, I glanced at her through the door. My heart clenched. Claire led me to the kitchen. We sat. She didn't start with apologies. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I've been talking to Tom." That name again. I waited. He knows now. About everything. About how I never told you. How I let you believe she was yours. And he's furious. I didn't say anything. She went on, her voice trembling a bit. He doesn't want to be involved. He says he's not ready for a child. That it's not the life he wanted. I nodded once, slowly. Of course. Of course. The man she lied for, lied about, didn't want to stay. Men like that never do. Claire's eyes searched mine. I was wrong. I know that now. I should have told you from the beginning. I should have given you the choice. A long pause. I don't expect you to forgive me, she added. But she still needs you. That broke me. Not because of her words, but because they were true. The baby, her baby, my baby in every way but blood, did need someone, but I wasn't sure if I was still that person. I stood up and walked to the nursery again. She was awake now, tiny hands reaching toward the mobile above her crib. She smiled when she saw me. That smile. God. It undid every wall I'd tried to build. I picked her up. She smelled like milk and baby powder, and memories I didn't know how to carry anymore. Claire stood at the doorway, watching. "I'm not asking for us," she whispered. "I know I broke that. I'm just asking, can you still be there for her? Even a little." I held the baby close. I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know yet, but something inside me was changing. I wasn't the man she'd lied to anymore. I wasn't the fool in love, blinded by hope. I was something else now. And I wasn't done. Not yet. I didn't return to the hotel that night. I didn't stay at Claire's place either. I just drove. Miles and miles. No destination. Just the hum of the road and the sound of my own thoughts clawing at the inside of my skull. It's strange, isn't it? How one person's choices can redraw the lines of your entire life. I had spent months dreaming about who I'd become as a father. Now I was wondering if I even had a place in that dream anymore. But one thing was becoming clear. I couldn't go back. Not to the man I was before. Not to the way things used to be. And not to Claire. She had cracked something inside me. Maybe not completely shattered it, but enough that I couldn't ignore the space between us anymore. Still, the baby. I thought about her every second, the way she giggled when I made faces, the way her tiny fingers curled around mine. She didn't ask for any of this. She didn't lie. She didn't choose the wrong man. Claire did. And now Claire was facing the weight of that choice. Tom had vanished, just like I expected. She was on her own now. No safety net, no backup plan. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly where she needed to be. The next morning, I drove to a lawyer's office. Not to sue, not yet. Just to understand my options. The lawyer, a tired-looking woman in her late 40s, listened patiently as I explained everything. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp. Apparently, my story wasn't so unique after all. "You have no legal rights," she said bluntly. "You're not the biological father. You were never married. And unless she names you the legal guardian or files for joint custody, you don't exist in the court's eyes." It felt like another punch to the gut. "So I just disappear?" I asked. She gave a soft sigh. "You can fight, but it's complicated, expensive, and most of the time, the mother wins." I nodded. Of course she does, but I wasn't there to win anything yet. I was there to learn, to prepare. Because if Claire thought I'd just vanished like Tom did, she had underestimated the man she lied to. Later that week, I agreed to meet her again. This time at a neutral place, a coffee shop. Near the park, she looked exhausted. I probably did too. We didn't talk much at first, just sat there sipping bitter coffee in uncomfortable silence. Then she said, "Thank you for holding her the other night." I nodded. "You're welcome. She missed you. She wouldn't sleep after you left." Kept turning her head toward the door. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "I've been talking to a lawyer," I said finally. Her face froze. "Not to fight you," I added quickly. "Not yet. But I need to know where I stand, and right now, that's nowhere." She looked down, ashamed, maybe afraid. "I don't want to take her from you," she whispered. "You've been more of a father than Tom ever could be." I leaned forward. "I need it in writing, Claire. Not just feelings, not guilt, something real." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll talk to my lawyer. We can figure something out." For the first time since everything collapsed, I felt a flicker of control, a small reclaiming of the dignity she'd taken from me. We sat in silence for a while longer. Then she asked, almost too softly, "Do you hate me?" I looked at her, really looked. I remembered the way she used to laugh with me, the way we picked out paint colors for the nursery, the way she looked at me the night she told me she was pregnant, with a kind of desperate hope I mistook for love. "No," I said quietly, "but I don't love you either." And that, I think, hurt her more. We parted ways outside the cafe. No hugs, no promises. Just two people who had broken each other standing in the wreckage of something they once called love. But I wasn't broken anymore. Something had changed in me. Not in an angry, bitter way. Not a man bent on revenge, but a man who had finally woken up. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I didn't run, didn't hide. I hit the gym again, reconnected with old friends, got back into photography, something I hadn't touched in years. People around me started noticing. "You look different," one of my co-workers said. "Lighter," another added. I just smiled, because they didn't know what it cost to feel that way. And Claire, she started texting more often. Photos of the baby, short videos, updates. I didn't respond to every message, but I watched them all. I wasn't sure what the future would look like, if I'd still be there in 5 years, if I'd walk her to school, if I'd still feel this ache every time she laughed. But I knew one thing. Claire had told her story. Now, it was my turn. It started with a knock on the door. Claire wasn't expecting me. She opened it in a bathrobe, hair in a loose bun, baby on her hip. She looked surprised, not nervous, just unsure. "I didn't think you were coming today," she said quietly. "I wasn't," I replied, "but I need a few minutes. Alone. With you." She glanced down at the baby who was playing with the drawstring on her robe, then nodded and handed her to the babysitter waiting inside. I noticed she had someone now, maybe because, deep down, she knew her world was less steady. We sat in the kitchen, same seats, same table. But this time, I wasn't here to ask for anything. I placed a folder on the table, neat, clean, nothing dramatic. She stared at it for a moment, then looked at me. "What is this?" "My proposal," I said calmly, her eyebrows pulled together. "Proposal for what?" I took a breath. "For shared custody, visitation, medical access, legal rights." Her face drained of color. "You said—" "I said I wouldn't fight." "You?" I interrupted, gently but firmly. "I never said I'd be invisible." She opened the folder. Read through the document. Everything was laid out. My time with the baby, my responsibilities, my boundaries. I had worked with a lawyer to ensure it wasn't a threat. It was a declaration of intent. "You're serious about this," she murmured, eyes scanning the page. "I've never been more serious in my life." She looked up. "Why now?" I let a few seconds pass. Because I've realized that your lie doesn't erase my truth. She blinked. You lied about her being mine, I continued. But that doesn't erase the nights I rocked her to sleep, the diapers I changed, the stories I whispered into the dark. Claire lowered her gaze. I don't need you to love me again, Claire, I said. But I do need you to respect what I've done, what I gave, even when I didn't know the whole truth. She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, and if I say no? I shrugged. Then I'll go to court. It'll be ugly, painful, and eventually public. But I won't stop. I don't want revenge. I want what's fair, for me and for her. She closed the folder and stared at her hands. I could see the weight settling into her shoulders. Not just guilt, but reality. For the first time, I wasn't begging. I wasn't broken. I was setting terms. That evening, she sent me a message. I'll sign it. You're right. You deserve this much. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. It wasn't a victory. It was a correction. But it mattered. A few weeks later, I held her again. The baby, not Claire, in the park, on a sunny afternoon. She reached out and touched my face with her tiny fingers. No judgment, no questions, just trust. And I realized something. Claire had taken the title from me, but not the bond. That was mine, earned, honest, undeniable. From that point on, everything shifted. Claire grew cautious around me. Not hostile, but guarded. She knew I wasn't playing the same role anymore. I had stepped out of the shadow she'd placed me in. And she didn't know what that meant yet. But I did. I was no longer just the man who stayed after the lie. I was the man who refused to disappear. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was calculated. Claire no longer looked at me like someone she could mold. She looked at me like someone she didn't recognize, like a mirror she hadn't meant to stand in front of. Weeks passed. I kept to my word. Visits, check-ins, keeping things civil. But the balance had shifted. She no longer controlled the story. I did. And now? It was time to close the loop. One Thursday evening, I invited her to meet me for dinner. Not a date, not a gesture of reconciliation, just a conversation. Neutral ground. She hesitated, of course. But curiosity wins when guilt is still fresh. We met at a quiet restaurant just outside the city, a place we used to like, before everything. She arrived wearing a soft sweater, hair pulled back, a faint, nervous smile on her lips. I had already ordered. Nothing fancy, nothing romantic, just food, a table, and a second envelope. When she sat down, her eyes immediately went to the envelope. "What's that?" she asked, half joking, half afraid. "You'll see," I said, calmly sipping water. Dinner was brief. She barely touched her food, and I didn't stretch out the suspense. "I want to show you something," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. She opened it slowly. Inside were printed screenshots, dozens of them, messages, emails, photos, all from her cloud account. Claire's face went pale. "I hired someone," I said quietly. "Not to hurt you, just to understand who I was, really sharing my life with." She didn't speak. "I know about Tom, not just that he's the father. I know he was still around during your pregnancy. I know you were still seeing him, even after you moved in with me." She looked like she couldn't breathe. "I know about the messages where you told him I was just the fallback. That I was safe, that I'd make a good dad even if the baby wasn't mine." She opened her mouth, closed it again. Tears started forming, but I didn't care anymore, not in the way I used to. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I continued. "It's not the betrayal, not even the child. It's that you used my love, weaponized it, to cover your cowardice." Claire reached for the folder, trying to gather the papers with shaking hands. I was scared, she said. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I didn't mean to. You meant every word, I interrupted. Don't rewrite the story now that you're caught in it. She tried again. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't care if you did, I said flatly. That's the difference. For the first time since everything began, she looked small, not soft, not fragile, but exposed. This isn't blackmail, I said. I'm not going to ruin your life. I'm not sending these to your boss, or your mother, or even to Tom. He's already gone. I leaned in slightly, voice low but steady. This is clarity, so you never again confuse my silence for weakness. Claire wiped her face. The restaurant felt quieter than before. I stood up. Keep the papers, burn them, frame them. It doesn't matter. She looked up at me, tears now running freely. What do you want from me? I looked at her for the last time, not with anger, not even sadness, just truth. Nothing. You already took everything you could, and I survived. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. I didn't feel like a man who'd won. I felt like a man who had reclaimed something far more valuable, myself. I didn't look back. Not at the restaurant, not at her tear-streaked face, not at the years we spent together that now felt like someone else's life. That chapter was over, and this time there was no cliffhanger. No lingering, what if I had faced the truth. Not just about her, but about myself. For a while, I thought healing would look like revenge, that I'd feel whole again the moment she finally saw what she had destroyed. But standing there in the quiet of that parking lot, I realized something much simpler. I didn't need her to break in order to rebuild myself. I already had. The days that followed felt lighter. Not because the pain disappeared, but because it had somewhere to go. I focused on what mattered. My work, my friends, and her, the baby. She was still part of my life, in small but meaningful ways. Claire and I kept it formal, structured visits, shared updates. I no longer stayed late, no longer played house, but I never missed a moment that was mine. And every time I held that little girl, I didn't think about DNA. I thought about promises, because love, real love, isn't a contract written in blood. It's what you show up for, even after the world has tried to convince you not to. Some people ask me why I stayed involved, why I didn't just walk away completely, start fresh somewhere else. But I never owed them answers. They didn't rock her to sleep at 3 a.m. They didn't hear her first laugh. They didn't watch her eyelids flutter while she dreamed in my arms. She may not be mine, but I'll always be part of her beginning. As for Claire, we speak less now. Polite, distant, professional. She never apologized again after that night. I think she knew words couldn't fix what she broke, and I didn't need her to try. Forgiveness doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes it looks like peace, like being able to say her name without bitterness, like walking away without looking over your shoulder. Months passed. Seasons changed, and one afternoon, I stood at the park, watching the baby. Her name is Ava, by the way, take her first wobbly steps toward me. She didn't know how complicated her story was. She didn't know the truth we had all bled for. She just laughed, reached for me, and in that moment, everything felt simple again. I bent down, scooped her into my arms and whispered, "I'm here. I always will be." Not because of who she is, not because of who Claire was, but because that's who I've become. A man who lost everything he thought he had, and found something stronger in return. Not justice, not revenge, but quiet, solid, unshakable self-respect. And from that foundation, I built a better life, not with lies, but with truth, one quiet, powerful step at a time.